Jim Dryburgh. I work for the New Zealand Defence Force. Until the beginning of this year, I was actually in uniform. I was an Army officer. And I've been in New Zealand for 17 years and the New Zealand Army for 17 years. But prior to that, I was actually in the British Army for 30 years. And I actually joined the Army when I was 16 years old. I actually left school one day and I was in the Army the next day. And I've been on that ride ever since as a people leader. It's probably not what you were expecting, but it's the green and red cards. Why is it the green and red cards? Because it's the green and red cards that give power to the black and white cards. Because the black and white cards are just black and white cards unless you ask a question. And of course the green and red cards are that first opportunity when you come into contact with the game about unlocking the power of those cards. So you can extend those green and red cards into all of the other questions that you might ask. For me, good leadership looks like stand back and lead. I've always been a believer in leadership is about enabling others. So it's about setting the conditions. It's about making people feel safe, secure, supported, and empowered. Empowerment's a very interesting thing for me because I think the moment that you say to people, you're empowered, it sounds as if you're giving them permission to be empowered, and by that very fact, you're disempowering them. People will feel empowered if you create the conditions for them to feel empowered, so that they will know that if they're making the decisions that it is within their power to make, that they're going to be backed in those decisions, that they can be creative, that they can be innovative. So yeah, leadership for me is very much about putting yourself into a position where if you have to step in, it's because something is going wrong, because actually you've already set up those conditions to allow your people to do what they do best. So the connection for me between leadership and emotion is about empathy, it's about understanding, it's about compassion. So in order to be effective in a leadership position, you ultimately have to understand your people. I think it was Richard Branson who said that forget about your customers, look after your people, train your people, invest in your people, and you'll have good customers. The connection between leadership and emotion is ultimately about understanding your people, understand what makes them tick. And of course, in order to do that, you have to understand the human condition, and the human condition is all about emotions. It's emotions that drive our behaviors, it's the behaviors that drive our performance, it's the behaviors that drive the culture. So that connection between emotions and culture is really, really important. And to be effective as a leader, you really need to understand that connection. I think there's a popular misconception that in order to be an effective leader in uniform or in a uniformed organisation like the Defence Force or the police or wherever, it's all about barking orders and people following those orders. And I don't want to take that out of context. There is a very important place where orders play their part, because you're acting in very, very dangerous circumstances where you need people to act quickly. But outside of that, actually, what we need is for people to be creative. We need them to be innovative. We need them to be able to think for themselves. I could give you countless examples in literature of where men followed their leaders out of love and respect rather than because they barked orders. And I think that was as true for me as a young officer when I was sitting on the North German plains waiting for the Russians to attack, as it was for the men in the trenches during the First World War. Essentially, you have to earn the respect of people, and that's a two-way thing. So respect is far more important than just barking out orders. I think leaders are hesitant to embrace emotion because they are not educated or aware or understand the power and the potential of understanding the effects that emotions can have on the business that they're doing. There are some very senior leaders out there today who struggle with this. It's not that long ago that I was having a conversation with a very senior leader when he said to me, "Oh, I'll tell you what, Jim, that's all very well, but let's forget the fluffy stuff and get on with the job." And unfortunately, I think that is an attitude, while it might not be hugely prevalent, is out there and needs to be combated, if only to get those leaders to understand that they have something there which if only they were to harness it and use it, could be incredibly effective for them. So I think that harnessing emotion makes you a better leader because to use a military expression, it's like a force multiplier. And one of the things that is an absolute truism is that you can't decide to be a leader. You can decide to do the things that might make you a leader, but the people who decide you are a leader are the people who follow you. If they don't follow you, you're not a leader, no matter what you say. So again, being able to understand what the basic motivations of people are, being able to understand that emotions drive what they do is another tool, if you like, in your tool set that allows you to take advantage of that, not in a cynical way, but in a constructive way. And there are two things that can lead to. Actually, there are three things. It can lead to individual success for you, it can lead to individual success for them, and it ultimately leads to success for everybody, because of course a rising tide raises all ships. The emotions I'm dealing with, there are two words that keep coming up. There are two emotional descriptions that keep coming up these days. One is overwhelmed, and one is anxiousness or anxiety. And when people are talking about those, they're talking about the pandemic, they're talking about the growth in gun crime, they're talking about climate change. But I think it's also the pattern of work that we see many organizations going through, because they're not taking time to breathe, they're not taking time for people to develop. So those words are coming up again and again when I'm running workshops with people. So I think when you let people express their emotions, particularly in the team environment, you're letting everybody know at that particular moment what the temperature is in the team. That's very important for the leader of that team, because they will know where they have to put a bit of extra effort in that day or where they can let off a bit. It's also important for the team as well, though, because they'll be working on a task. They'll know that the person working alongside them is having a bit of trouble in this particular area, whether it be, in their home life or something to do with work, or they're waiting for their exam results from university or whatever it happens to be. And that makes you treat people in a different way. It builds trust over time, because one of the great things about this game is that you're entering that vulnerability space. David Lencioni talks about vulnerability-based trust, and this is a way of building up that vulnerability-based trust. Emotional leadership, to me, ultimately means understanding my people. And the best way to understand my people is to understand where they are emotionally. Of course, you can't see emotions. What we see are the effects of emotions, and you need to understand what those effects are in order to be able to audit back to what the emotions are that they are probably feeling. You need to be ready with the tool set that you need in order to be able to help them through those things. Or, some of those emotions might be positive, and therefore, what have I got to offer this person today in the way of a development opportunity, or where am I going to stretch them? Because it's not always about bad stuff, of course. A lot of the time it is about good stuff. When you suppress or ignore emotions, I think you've got a potential best and a potential worst situation, in my view. At best, what you're doing is you're missing an opportunity. If it's good or bad emotions, you're missing an opportunity to recognize what's going on and therefore explore what the options are to you, either to build on that or to mitigate for it. At worst, you're potentially missing some signals about the fact that you're on the road to wreck and ruin. They're fantastic signals that give you opportunities which you have a choice either to take or not to take.